So good evening. We are back to the study of the Spirit's book. We are on the conclusion of the book. The conclusion is composed of 9 items. We did 5 of them, so today we start on item 6. So Philip, can you read for us, please? Thanks.
Yes. Believing that Spiritism derives its strength from physical manifestations during meetings, and that debunking these manifestations can bring about its downfall, is to oversimplify this theory. Its strength lies in its philosophy, and particularly in its appeal to reason and common sense. In ancient times, it was the subject of secret studies, carefully hidden from society. Today, there are no secrets, and Spiritism is out in the open, without ambiguity, mysticism, or allegories that would be susceptible to false interpretation. The time has come for the truth to be told and understood by all. Far from being opposed to enlightenment, this revelation is intended for all human beings. It does not require a blind acceptance, but urges everyone to take stock of their own beliefs. And as its teachings are based on reason, it will always be stronger than those that are based on annihilation. Can obstacles intended to stop their production block spirit manifestations? No, because these efforts only excite curiosity and the desire to study a forbidden subject. If spirit manifestations were the privilege of a single individual, they could easily be ended by simply preventing that person's action. Unfortunately, for our adversaries, the production of these manifestations is an inherent capability of every single member of society, from the poor to the rich, from the greatest to the least, and from the mansion to the hovel. The prohibition of their performance in public would have little effect, as they are most successfully produced in private anyway. Since anyone may be a medium, how would it be possible to prevent a family in the privacy of their own home, people in the silence of their own rooms, or even a prisoner in a cell from communicating with the spirits in the very presence of those who try to prevent them from doing so? If mediums were forbidden to exercise their abilities in one country, how could they be stopped from practicing it somewhere else in the world? Since mediums exist in every nation on earth, half the human race would need to be incarcerated in order to have any chance of silencing all mediums. Even if they were possible to burn all spirit books in existence, they would immediately be reproduced because their source is beyond the reach of attack, and it is impossible to imprison or burn the spirits who are their real authors. Spiritism is not the work of one single individual. It is as old as creation itself. It is found everywhere, in all religions, and even more so in Catholicism than in others. The Catholic religion contains everything that constitutes Spiritism: the existence of spirits of varying degrees, their secret and open relationships with people, guardian angels, reincarnation, and the emancipation of the soul during sleep, second sight, visions, and manifestations of every kind, apparitions, even including tangible apparitions. As for demons, they are nothing more than bad spirits, with the exception of the belief that the former are doomed to wrongdoing forever, as the path of progress is never closed to anyone. The only difference that exists is in terminology. What does modern Spiritism accomplish? It makes a whole of what has been scattered about in pieces by explaining in clear and precise terms what has been, up until now, shrouded in allegory. It eliminates the products of superstition and ignorance created by people, leaving only reality intact. This is its mission, of which there is no founder. It highlights and coordinates what already exists, but creates nothing new because its elements belong to every country and every age. Who can flatter themselves by believing that they are strong enough to stifle it by ridicule or persecution? If it were possible to destroy it in one place, it would simply reappear in another, or even in the exact same spot from which it was banished. It exists in nature, and no one can obliterate a power of nature or veto God's will. What interest could anyone possibly have in opposing Spiritism? These ideas are an objection against the cruelty and mistreatment that spring from pride and selfishness, which are profitable to the few and harmful to many. Therefore, Spiritism would have the masses on its side, while its challengers would be those who support the abuse it opposes. By their influence, these ideas make people more compassionate towards one another, less greedy for material possessions, and more submissive to God's designs. It guarantees order and tranquility.
Thanks, Philip. So, Kardec starts talking about a misconception that at that time people thought that Spiritism it's would be only physical manifestations, right? Which was the reps and the table turnings and everything. So people that were trying to discredit Spiritism were trying to discredit the manifestations. We saw this here in the United States with the Sisters Fox, that they were attacked and examined and then tried to be tried to be discredited by all means. So it happened here, it happened there in France, of course, at the time of Kardec. But Kardec, from the physical manifestations, created a doctrine, created a series of questions and answers, which is this book, that explains the origin, the destiny, and the reasons why we eternal spirits are here, where do we come from, where we are going. So the strength lies in its philosophy, and in particularly in its appeal to reason and common sense. That's very important because Spiritism, it's always looks to have an answer and an explanation for everything that that we question. Sometimes, of course, it's impossible to have an explanation. Some things are beyond our capacity of explain or understand, but there are no dogmas. There are no impositions in Spiritism. If we don't know the answer, we'll say that, either we don't know, we are not prepared, we don't have the answer in Spiritism yet. A lot of the things that were not answered at the time of Kardec were answered later by the spirits through the works of André Luiz, of Chico Xavier, and Divaldo Franco, and the spirits that came through these mediums. So different from before Spiritism, where the manifestations of spirits were the subject of secret studies, were hidden from society. The religious organizations would hide it from the general public, and then you have, you have in Judaism the Kabbalah, you have in the Muslim religion the Sufis, which are all parts of the beliefs that have a more spiritual involvement with the spiritual world, but it's hidden from mainstream, and it's kind of even marginalized inside the mainstream religion, right? Nowadays, Kabbalah in Judaism is considered something outside of the religion, or in the outskirts of the religion. Spiritism comes, and the spirits come through spiritism, telling us there are no secrets. It's out in the open. There is no allegories. There is no mysticism. There is no ambiguity. Again, reason and common sense. That is what should appeal to people that come to spiritism. Again, the moral aspect that a lot of people talk about religion, spiritism being a religion and not being a religion. Kardec talks about not being a religion, and then talks about it being a religion in Genesis. But again, religion in the sense of reconnect with God, yes, because what Spiritism is trying to bring to us is this reconnection. But in the sense that it has an organized structure with a pope or with a high priest, with all these sort of things, Spiritism does not have it, right? So he says that the Spiritism is there. It's there out in the open, does not require any blind acceptance, asks everyone to chase the truth and to research on their own, accept what they can, put aside what they can't, and reflect on it or leave it for later. And that the attempts to prevent it from existing, which was something that was happening at the time of Kardec, and it continued, and until today, there are many people that try to make it ridiculous, try to make fun of spirit communications. We see in the Hollywood production, right, that you have some serious movies about spirits, and you have some movies that try to make fun of it, and or make it so ridiculed that people would not believe it, right? So it continues to happen as it happened at the time of Kardec. When Kardec brought Spiritism, he said that he was really opposing to materialism, because understanding the time of that Spiritism came about, we were trying to move away from religion because we were dominated by religion for centuries, and the science freed itself from religion and in the turn of the 18th to the 19th century, at the time of the French Revolution, and science was trying to spread the materialism, in a sense, as opposed to spiritualism. And Spiritism comes and brings the middle ground, not a blind religion, blind faith, or not a complete materialist, but especially focusing on the materialists. So it was attacked, but as Kardec says here very well, you cannot prevent the spirits from manifesting themselves. They have been doing so since the beginning of our existence, since there was the first incarnated being and discarnated beings on Earth, you had a communication. So you try to prohibit somewhere, it appears somewhere else. The persecution of the witches in this country here in Salem killed the physical body of many, but the spirits continue to manifestate. And the Sisters Fox were proof later that you cannot burn. You can burn the people, but you cannot burn the ideas. Because if mediums were forbidden to exercise their abilities in one country, they will start practicing somewhere else, right? Russia, which is a country that prouds itself in having no religion, in being an atheist country, is one of the places that produced the largest number of mediums and mediumistic manifestations in the time of the communist regime and even nowadays. So it's there, you cannot really prevent it from appearing, because it comes from the other side to our side, from the spiritual side. And even when they try to, he talks about if it were possible to burn all the spiritist books, they would immediately be reproduced because their source is beyond the reach of attack, which brings us to something that happened in the 19th century, in the year 1861, October 9, in Barcelona, that they burned 300 spiritist books in an Inquisition tribunal. It was called the Act of Faith. The responsible for the burning, the bishop, was Don Antonio Palau and E. Termens. And, in the end, what happened was that it really helped even more disseminate the Spiritist literature and the Spiritist ideas, because it called the attention to Spiritism. And, nowadays, when we see in this country people persecuting and trying to forbid books from being used in schools and in libraries, it only really will have the opposite effect. It will call the attention of the books to the authors, to the ideas, and will help disseminate the ideas. So this type of actions are done by individuals that really do not understand we eternal spirits and how progress works. We study in Spiritism the law of progress. Just to talk a little bit more about this bishop, Don Antonio Palau, the bishop of the Inquisition in Barcelona. He died 1 year later, so not long after the burning of the books, and he reincarnated in 1917 in Brazil and became a religious priest called Sebastião Bernardes Carmelita. He was born in Uberaba, which is the city that Chico Xavier moved when in 1959 and lived until his death. And he was a priest in that city. And he became known during his life as the priest of the poor and of the sick. He was recognized as the most ecumenic of all the priests, ecumenic in the sense of accepting other beliefs, other religions, and embracing different ideas. So it is, he met with Chico Xavier. He studied Spiritism. He met with Chico Xavier, and apparently he discussed with Chico the idea of leaving the church and starting working as a Spiritist. And Chico told him that he would do a much better service staying inside the church and disseminating Spiritist ideas inside the church than leaving the church and being one more Spiritist out there trying to disseminate Spiritism. There were plenty of those working. So it's interesting, right? It just tells us that those that are responsible for these barbaric acts or these persecutions, the law of cause and effect will take care of these individuals in future incarnations, and they will have to repair the damage that they have done. I don't know if this priest in Brazil knew of his past. I'm not sure. It is the source is more than one book. It's not only Chico, but also Ivone Pereira. One of her communications talked about him. So it's not something that it's a speculation. It really happened, and Chico met him. So Kardec continues saying that Spiritism is not the work of a single individual. And the very fact that Kardec decided to use a pseudonym, not use his real name, not to call the attention to the work, tells us that besides him being a humble person, he didn't want to attract the attention for the name, but for the ideas. And he said that Spiritism, the truth that Spiritism brings, there's nothing new. It was always there, right? Spiritism explains it. So mediumship, reincarnation, the existence of spirits in various degrees, guardian angels, emancipation of the soul during the sleep. These are all things that existed way before Spiritism, right? When you have in the Catholic Church, you have apparitions of the so-called saints. What are these, right? Spiritism just explains how it works, but they existed before Spiritism. And even the demons that Spiritism explains that they are only, less evolved spirits or bad spirits, Spiritism just explains that they won't stay like that forever, like some believe in the Catholic Church. So he continues saying that what Spiritism did, and he did so well, and still, I believe, is one thing that Spiritism has that you don't find anywhere else, or almost anywhere else, because I don't want to say that you won't find anywhere else, is that he put all the pieces together, right? I was talking to a friend that studies a lot of different religions, beliefs, philosophies, and he gets a piece of each of these parts. And I told him, listen, you try to build a puzzle with pieces that don't match each other, you're not going to be able to build a puzzle. So as he says here, Spiritism takes all these pieces that are scattered and put them together and create something that makes sense. Removes the allegory, eliminates superstition and ignorance created by people, leaving only what's real, and explains the reality and how does it work, right? So you talk about the reincarnation. I couldn't find so far anywhere that explains reincarnation in the way that Spiritism does. A lot of beliefs in reincarnation and talks about reincarnation exists out there, but the explanation of how the process works, I haven't seen anywhere besides in Spiritism. So Kardec continues, right? If for those that are opposing it, bring something better, right? What interest do you have in opposing it? it's pride and selfishness, right? Whenever you try to oppose something without any real reason, it is pride and selfishness. Because if you bring something that makes sense, and again, Kardec said, if science proves Spiritism wrong in any point, stay with science. So if someone brings something that explains something better than Spiritism does, Spiritism will embrace it, right? But, we haven't seen it. And again, it stays because it's the work of spirits, it will continue existing. Kardec went back to the spiritual world, Chico went back to the spiritual world, Ivone Pereira went back to the spiritual world. Spiritism is still here. We will go back to the spiritual world sooner or later. I hope later than sooner. But, Spiritism will continue. And with the knowledge that we are acquiring, we are going to help ourselves on our journey. So he finishes saying Spiritism would have the masses on its side, while its challengers will be those who support the abuse it opposes. It's, saying that if you are opposing because of pride and selfishness, or because of fanaticism, which is something that happens a lot also, time will take care of it, right? And again, if we are faced with those that are challenging us, we have to understand what are their intentions in discussing and challenging us. If their intention is serious, we enter into the discussion. If their intention is only to attack and not listen, we leave it aside because their time will come also. Okay? Comments, questions here? Okay, number 7 now, Philip.
Spiritism presents three different aspects, namely spirit manifestations, the philosophic and moral principles deduced from these events, and the application of these principles. Its adherents are divided into three classes or 3 degrees of advancement. First, there are those who believe in the authenticity of the spirit manifestations and validate them as an experimental science. Second, there are those who understand its moral bearings. Lastly, there are those who practice, or at least try to practice, its moral code. Regardless of the perspective, whether experimental, scientific, or moral, everyone perceives that they support an entirely different order of ideas, which must produce profound modifications in the state of the humankind. Everyone also realizes that these modifications can only be for good. As to our adversaries, they may also be grouped into 3 categories. First, there are those who automatically deny whatever is new or whatever they do not initiate, and who speak without knowing what they're talking about. Everyone who refuses to admit anything beyond the scope of their sentence belong to this group. They do not see anything, do not want to see anything, and are even more unwilling to delve into anything. These individuals are, in fact, unwilling to see too clearly for fear of being forced to admit that they are mistaken. For them, Spiritism is highly improbable, insane, utopian, and does not exist, period. They are willfully incredulous. In this group, we may also include those who have glanced at the subject merely to say, I tried, but I was not able to find any merit here, and who do not seem to be aware that half an hour is not enough time to learn a new field of science. Second, there are those who, although perfectly aware of the legitimacy of the phenomenon, oppose it out of self-interested motives. They know that Spiritism is true, but they attack it because they fear its consequences. Third, there are those who find the moral rules of Spiritism to be extremely severe condemnation of their actions and habits. Seriously acknowledging Spiritism is an inconvenience they neither reject nor accept, but prefer to close their eyes to it. The first class is swayed by pride and conjecture, the second by ambition, the third by selfishness. This opposition disappears over time. We should then seek a fourth class of antagonists, those who base their antagonism on a careful and thorough examination, providing positive and irrefutable evidence of its falsehood. It is too much to expect of human nature that it can be changed suddenly by spiritist ideas. Undoubtedly, the actions are not the same and equally powerful in people who support these ideas. Nevertheless, the result, however slight it may be, is always beneficial, if only by proving the existence of an extracorporeal world and disproving the opposing materialistic doctrines. Mere observation of spiritist phenomena can yield the same result. However, it produces other effects in people who understand its philosophy and see something more than curious phenomena. The first and most common is the development of religious notions, even in those who are indifferent to spiritual things, and even if they are not materialists. This sentiment leads to a disregard for death, not a desire for death, because a spiritist defends his or her life like anyone else. It is an indifference that causes the person to accept death when inevitable, with resignation and without regret, as something to be welcomed rather than feared, due to the belief in life after death. The second effect is acceptance of the vicissitudes of life. Spiritism leads us to consider ideas from such an elevated perspective that the significance of physical life lessens proportionately, and we are less painfully affected by its trials and tribulations. The consequence is that we have more courage when we face adversity, more moderation in our desires, and a more strongly rooted disgust for the idea of shortening our lives. Spiritism teaches that suicide always results in loss of what we hope to attain. The certainty that there is a future life, that it correlates directly with our deeds. I've lost the place.
First line here, and the possibility of meeting loved ones.
And the possibility of meeting loved ones in afterlife gives spiritists solace. Likewise, a continual observance of life beyond the grave and understanding of what has been a mystery up to now amplifies one's horizons infinitely. The third effect is to encourage indulgence and understanding for the flaws of others. However, it must be admitted that selfishness is one of the most persistent human traits and more difficult to uproot than others. We are willing to make sacrifices if they cost nothing, and provided they impose no deprivation. Money exercises an irresistible attraction, and very few understand the word luxury when it relates to themselves. Thus, the renunciation of the self is the most eminent sign of progress.
Thanks, Philip. So, Kardec talks to us about the three different aspects of Spiritism, and we can analyze where we find ourselves with these three aspects, right? So, there first is the spirit manifestations, And then we have the philosophic and moral principles deduced from these events, and then the application of these principles. So in the first class are those that are only interested in spirit manifestations and that validate them as an experimental science, as Kardec says. We find these in many spiritualists nowadays, that many of them focus only on the spirit manifestations. Some of them already focus on the applications of what they are learning from the spirits on the moral aspects and philosophical aspects. So understand the moral beings. In Spiritism, I believe that the vast majority of those that consider themselves Spiritists have gone beyond the first stage. So I believe that most of us Spiritists are somewhere between the second and the third, because we mostly understand, as Kardec says here, its moral bearings, but we are not able to fully practice its moral code, or some of us try to practice, some of us barely try to practice, some of us, very few of us, fully practice them, right? So I believe we Spiritists, after 160-something years, are there, moving from second to third on the three different aspects. But we understand the necessity, we understand the whole package, right? The manifestation of spirits as necessary to bring us knowledge, learning, the study and an understanding of these philosophical and moral principles that are brought to us by the spirits, and the necessity of trying to put them in practice on our daily lives. So we understand the package in Spiritism, and I believe outside Spiritism, you still find people that do not fully understand the whole package, or even parts of the package they struggle to understand. And then Kardec talks about the adversaries of Spiritism. He also groups them in three categories, which I think it's interesting for us, because this is what we see out there also, still the same today, right? So the first ones are those that deny everything just for the sake of denying, because they don't want to, they're not interested in learning, they're not interested in looking at it, and they just flatly deny, because they are not willing to change their views or delve in anything. So, spiritual, we survive after death, and they will answer either I don't believe or let's see, but I'm not worried about it right now. So for those individuals, time will tell them. There's nothing we can do for them, because we cannot impose what they are not willing to accept. You cannot discuss with someone that is not willing to discuss, right? So this first type of individuals, Spiritism is improbable, insane, utopian, and does not exist, period, as Kardec says here. Willfully incredulous. Or those that looked at it very quickly and said, there's nothing to be seen here, not interested. Again, they exist, they are out there. We shouldn't concern ourselves with them. Just leave them be, and let's not waste our times with them also, because we see a lot of people trying to convince others of something, and they end entering in useless discussions that get nowhere, right? Second, Kardec talks about that those that, despite aware of the phenomena, spite of aware of our spiritual nature, they don't want to accept it because of self-interested motives. And again, I'm not saying self-interested, and I don't think Kardec says it here, in always in a negative way, right? Those that are very serious followers of other religions, they oppose to it because it goes against their beliefs. And we talked, Wayne brought these questions a couple of times on our Q&As on Sundays, right? We talked about the differences between why Spiritism was spread in Brazil a little bit easier than it does here in the US, right? Because in Brazil, people go to the church, go to a Spiritist center, go to the African related religions, and are comfortable in going to all of them and picking pieces of each. Here in the United States, it's much more difficult. People that follow their religious seriously are not open to any other type of religions. So these are self-interested motives, but not in a negative way. Again, they may attack Spiritism because they fear its consequence or because they don't want to deal with the consequences. But again, it is not always negative. It's sometimes the stage that they are and the faith and belief they have in their own religions, right? Or those that do not have any religion at all, call themselves spiritualists vaguely, but are not interested really in going deeper into it, right? So they are not very interested. And again, those, if they are open to a serious discussion, it's possible to have a discussion with them and present our views and listen to their views and argue the differences. But it's not very easy because they are not, in general, they are not very open. And third, Kardec talks here about those that don't want to know Spiritism, because if they learn Spiritism, they have to reconsider their own ways, their actions and habits, right? Because the moral side of Spiritism goes against their actions and their habits. And so a knowledge in Spiritism would be an inconvenience to their lives. So they prefer to close their eyes to it, right? Spiritism teaches us, the more you know, the more responsible you are. So if you study, go deeper into Spiritism, you have to reflect on your behavior, on how you live your lives. You have to reflect and you have to analyze. So it talks about the first class being swayed by pride and conjecture, right? They don't believe in anything and they don't want to believe. It's pride. I'm comfortable in my own non-belief. The second, it's ambition, in the sense that they are immersed in their own beliefs and faith. And the third one, of course, selfishness, because if you don't want to change, you want to continue to live the way you live, you are, above all, selfish. Kardec says the opposition disappears over time. Yes, it does. Even when we go back to the spiritual world, or in the next incarnation, or a couple of incarnations down the road. But then he says, we should really look for the fourth class of antagonists, that we are still looking for those, right? Those that oppose it based on careful and thorough examination, but providing positive and irrefutable evidence of its falsehood, right? Those are the ones that we should look for. We should find to have the discussion. We haven't found them, because they come with preconceived ideas. They are not willing to study. and they are willing only to impose their own ideas. So we'll continue to look for those that will bring the proofs that Spiritism doesn't have the right ideas and teachings. But then Kardec says, it's too much to expect of human nature that it can be changed suddenly by Spiritist ideas, right? Spiritism exists for 160, 70 years, and most of the world had never heard of it. Few people that heard of it are not willing to listen to it, and you have a growing number of people that are more interested, that study a little bit more, but it takes time. It's not going to take over the world quickly. You think of a Christianity, the followers of Jesus, it took 300 years for it to become an established religion, right? And of course, once it became an established religion, it became very complicated with all the deviations that it happened after it became an official religion. And you can read all about this in the book On the Way to the Light that we studied a couple of years ago. Talks about history from the spiritual side. So it comes slowly. Kardec talks about what it brings to us. The first and most common is the development of religious notion. So it is a religion, even those who are indifferent to spiritual things, because if it teaches the notion that we are eternal spirits, that we continue to evolve, that we survive after death, if it makes people fear less death, it already helped. Makes us more willing to accept the challenges of the physical life. And the consequence is that we have more courage when we face adversity. So Spiritism can teach us that. It already helped us. The certainty of the future life, understanding that we survive, that we are all spirits evolving, so it helps, encourages us to have indulgence and understanding for the flaws of others. But he concludes that it must be admitted that selfishness is one of the most persistent human traits and very difficult to uproot. And when we are living our physical lives, we get easily distracted by the physical pleasures, money, and all the things that are the necessities that we face here, the physical necessities. So when we are looking at the signs of progress of someone, we should look as the renunciation of the self, is what Kardec tells us here in the end of this item 7. Okay? Any questions, comments here? Okay, we're not going to 8 because we have only less than 10 minutes left. There are only 2 items left in the conclusion, which are 8 and 9, and we will finish the book appropriately in the last meeting of the year. So we'll start the new year. We'll restart studying the Spirit's book. So next week we'll do 8 and 9. And then we won't have a meeting on the 28th. We'll be closed. We'll be closed from Christmas evening, 24th, to New Year's Day, which is January 1st. We reopen January 2nd with the study of Spiritism and Noon. We, on the Spirit's book, will be here next week, and then we'll be back on January 4th. The study on Sundays, we will have this Sunday the study of the Medium's book, which is the 3rd Sunday of the month, and then we'll be closed for a couple of Sundays because of Christmas and New Year's. We'll have a lecture this Saturday on the United States Spiritist Federation. The lecture will be by Joyce Magalhães. Does happiness exist? So it's a reflection about what is happiness in the view of Spiritism. Is it possible to achieve complete happiness in life? How to feel happy when life is full of trials and challenges? So this is this coming Saturday, 11 a.m. The book club has stopped from vacations. It will be back on January 10th with the book. We are reading the book, The Ill-Fated Diamond by Victor Hugo, and through the psychography of Divaldo Franco. Okay? Carol, can you do our final prayer?
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much, John, and thank you very much, Philip, for reading. Infinite Creator and Supreme Intelligence, we are grateful again to be together for our study of the Spirit's book, the concluding chapter, the overview. Spiritism appeals to reason and common sense. Spiritism will offer explanations as to our origin and the destiny as we are eternal spirits. There are no dogmas, and many spirits assisted Allan Kardec with the codification of Spiritism. There are no secrets nor mysticism. Spiritism is open to study without the need for blind acceptance. It is available to all to progress. Spiritism masterfully assembles all the pieces of the teachings and will evolve with each generation that passes. The three aspects are spirit manifestation, moral understanding, and the application of the teachings for the betterment in our world. We know that we are challenged to overcome pride and selfishness. Slowly, we are going forth to uproot these. Let's keep the faith. Let us do so. We give thanks to the spiritual benefactors and the good spirits for guiding and inspiring us this evening. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us for our loved ones, our teachers, the directors, the counselors, the mediums, the workers, and all who are participating and taking classes at SGNY. We pray for inner peace and especially for world peace for those who are suffering in the physical and spiritual worlds. We pray for our center, SGNY, and all Spiritist centers throughout the world that they may grow, expand, and be totally protected. As we close, we humbly ask for safety and protection as we return to family, friends, loved ones, and coworkers. May we remind ourselves as we go forth to be beacons of love, of light, of peace, of service, and of charity. So be it.